Today on Spirit Spire, we discuss rebuilding Catholic culture, the problems with technology we all have, and reclaiming authentic beauty with Aaron Burns, starting right now.
Broadcasting from the Cathedral of the Assumption in Louisville, Kentucky, this is Spirit and Spire. And now, here is your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Spirit and Spire. I'm your host today, John Soule. Joined with me is my co-host, Vincent Ricketts.
Hello.
Good to have you, Vincent. And we are also very excited to have a guest today, Aaron Burns. He works for Bonaventure Bookkeeping. He has a lot to share with us today, so thank you for being on the show, Aaron.
Thanks for letting me come on. I'm excited.
Yeah, it's going to be good. So we always love to get to know our guests and really draw the audience into the heart of who we're having these conversations with. And so would you maybe start a little bit before we get into your business and professional life and how you're serving the church, maybe how you got into your faith and really fell in love with Christ and his church? So maybe your personal faith story.
Ooh, that's big.
I know. I love the open-ended questions, right? Tell us your whole life.
Yes. Well, I am a cradle Catholic. Grew up in southern Indiana, so not actually Louisville.
Close enough.
Yeah. Went to Catholic school, went to Catholic high school. Maybe to my detriment.
Yes, we can all feel that sometimes.
Yeah. But also, right. But all in God's timing. So I went to Holy Family in New Albany, and then Providence in Clarksville. And we didn't do like a lot of the family rosaries. We didn't have many family devotions growing up, but my parents were consistent about meal prayer. We were very consistent about Sunday Mass. We weren't creasters by any stretch of the imagination. And
Creasters.
Yes, I've heard other terms for that. Do you know any off the top of your head?
C&E Catholics are usually,
C&E,
or cafeteria,
cafeteria.
Things like that. But pray for everyone on their journey, right?
Absolutely. And so, there's that Fulton Sheen quote that's either you start to, I'm going to get it backwards, I'm thinking about it. You either think how you act, or you act how you think. And so my actions, as you get further into high school, started deviating from the way I thought about my faith. And ultimately, instead of reforming my actions, I went through a period of my life where I just stopped thinking about the faith. And that was the second half of high school, all of college. And I just... there just came a point, I don't want to share anything too crazy, too spicy here. But there just came a point where living for one's own immediate sense of satisfaction was not good. Not good. Kind of maybe stared into the abyss a little bit, and I blinked. I was like, you know what? God sounds kind of cool. I actually remember pointing out to a lot of my friends who my friends weren't. Maybe there's an exception out there. My friends growing up were not anti-Christian. They weren't edgy like that, but they weren't interested in needing to live very particular moralities out. And but I do remember thinking the Christians seem really happy, I was late college and such. I was like, things are kind of sad and depressing in different areas of life. I mean, I had lost my father in college due to cancer. God rest his soul. But that wasn't the only thing in my life. And I just felt like, things are just existentially heavy. And the Christians seem happy and they have their life together. And so it kind of started out almost a little mercenary. It just was I wanted to have my life together. I wanted to not I wanted to do things that felt like an adult should do. And so one of those things was religion and reforming my actions. And very quickly, I got pretty serious about it. I'm one of those online trad reverts types. Like,
Yes.
it took me like all of 30 seconds to find Sensus Fidelium, and then I was like, I need to go to Latin Mass. In fact, I started going to St. Louis Bertrand because as soon as I started coming back to the faith, I knew my wife, who was not yet my wife, she was not yet my girlfriend, but we worked together, and she was a Christian. She knew kind of that I didn't have my life together, but we got along really well, and soon, like she went on a mission trip while I made this big decision that I was going to go back to church. I was going to start acting responsible again. And as soon as she got back, took her to the grocery store to get her some stuff since she had been away on mission. And I was like, I think I want to be Christian again. And she tells the story from her perspective that in her head, she just basically started screaming like, no, because she knew that we would date, because she really liked me. And the only reason we weren't dating was that I was degenerate. So
That's awesome. Oh my God.
and so like 2 weeks goes by, and we basically are like, yeah, we're gonna date. In fact, it's funny because I was a little scared about committing to like asking her if she actually did like me, and we went on like a lunch date to Chick-fil-A, and I was trying to beat around the bush. I don't even remember how I was phrasing it, but I was trying to basically draw out of her whether or not she was interested in me without saying it. And I've got like this vague sense of a no, and I was like, oh darn, okay. And then it was quiet for a moment, and she was like, what are we saying right now? What is happening? And I was like, oh, do you like me? She was like, yes. And I was like, awesome. And
I'm happy she said that to draw out your courage, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And so we spent about 6 months going to Sojourn because that's where she was at. And
that's the old St. Vincent de Paul across from the Maloney Center.
We went to that exact one. They actually have multiple campuses.
That's where my grandma and grandpa were married back when it was St. Vincent de Paul.
Right.
So that's cool.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And so, listening to them and kind of starting to take it seriously, I was kind of like, the little bits that I did know from growing up were coming back to me, and I was like, the Catholics have that right. What happened eventually? So, really, I think by the time someone or the internet, who knows if it was an algorithm or a person, I got to Sensus Fidelium, then was like getting like a fire hose of information, a mixture of stuff I was getting reminded of and things I never knew. And one day in the break room, I was like, I think we need to be Catholic. And luckily, she wasn't actually raised anti-Catholic. She was barely raised Christian. She was raised Christian by some friends' parents who decided to start taking them to like a Pentecostal camp.
Wow.
But her mother's side is Catholic, and her grandmother was a practicing Catholic. And I was trying to get my foot in the door. And so I was like, well, where did your grandma go? I mean, let's just go there. Well, glory be to God, it was St. Louis Bertrand. One of the best parishes in Louisville.
That's a gift. Now, so for those of the audience who might not know, can you describe what Sensum Fidelius is?
Yeah, it's a YouTube channel of sermons and conferences. They tend to be of the traditional bent, meaning it's typically priests who offer the Latin Mass according to the 1962 or 1954 rubrics. And sometimes it also comes with certain theological opinions of a certain bent. But there's, depending on the topic, there's variety. So
Sure. So as that drew you in, how have you progressed into your faith since then?
Yeah.
Because I know that that can definitely catch your heart on fire, give you a lot of zeal, but you can also find yourself hitting a lot of roadblocks.
Yes.
And confusion or disillusionment. And so how did you navigate that? What has that experience been like? How have you integrated your understanding into a more practical, lived experience of your faith?
So I think
so that you don't become jaded, depressed, and sad about the state of the
absolutely.
church, right?
Yeah, at first, you get into this whole thing where you have to be able to rationally explain you get into apologist mode, right? Like, regardless if it's a conversion to the traditionalist camp or not, like, when you're reverting or converting, there's, like, this whole apologist mode, especially with the internet. It's like, well, if I just memorize enough of the facts, enough of the counter arguments, then, like, boom, there we go. There is no room for epistemological doubt or anything like that. And so there's a lot of that, especially within the realm of, like, Vatican II and all that kind of stuff. But I was never tempted to go sedevacantist, which for those who might not be aware means, like, they don't view the popes of Vatican II or the Second Vatican Council as valid because the practices deviated too far from tradition and a few theological opinions that we don't have to go into because I don't care that much about those.
Right. I mean, it's really just very hopeless to even go down that
it's
road.
It's boring, in my opinion. I was
the
never.
seat of Peter is vacant. Great. Trust
like,
the Holy Spirit?
I don't know. I was like, if that's the case, then, like, it should be Protestant or Orthodox.
Right. Is there any hope at all?
Yeah. And so I think really what just over time happened is that I stopped wanting to play the apologist game, and I just wanted to live my life. Like, I had, our fourth child is due any day now, and...
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. And you just had your first.
Yeah, that's right.
What's her name?
Lily Ann Rose. We just had our
beautiful.
first daughter, so praise the Lord.
Our first daughter is Rose. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Look at that.
But I just think, like, the more time that passes, I get further into marriage, further into being a father, further into my career and working for myself. I just felt, as a layman, like, called to a little bit more action orientation instead of, like, being an and I wasn't even interested in ever being an apologist, but just, like, that whole, I don't know, just mindset of, like, having to answer every random question and me totally certain about things. I'm like, no, I'm just kind of, like, I'm Catholic. I'm like, this just is, like, I think people get stuck into having to defend and debate everything, whereas I'm more interested in saying, well, these are, like, my basic presuppositions. They're actually not up for discussion. I'm happy to discuss in an evangelistic way, happy to discuss if someone's curious about why I believe something, but they're just not up for discussion. And so instead of being stuck on that plane and having to constantly discuss what my presuppositions are, it's like, well, now I have them, and I'm building off of them, and I'm going forward with life.
Well, I think that's more effective anyway, to draw people into the heart of the church, right? Because when you're constantly on defense, there's some level of you're never scoring any points, right? You're never actually winning any games on that level. I mean, you could have good defense and technically win, but it's more fun when you're scoring points, right?
Absolutely.
When you're actually doing something for the cause, and that to me is drawing people into the church through attracting them and loving them and having mercy on them, especially when they're coming with that longing for forgiveness and love, right?
Absolutely.
You want a more receptive audience.
Yes.
That's really it. So that's beautiful.
You say I've also found that the Catholic presuppositions are always they're always the ones that make the most sense. And I mean, I'm biased,
Right.
but
Me too.
John and I teach theology of the body for a living, and what drew me to that, really, one of the biggest things was the fact that it just the one of the baseline kind of ideas or presuppositions there is, hey, you have this longing in your heart for something that you're not currently getting from the world. Maybe, just maybe, it's God.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like,
that's it. That's TLB.
maybe, just maybe, Jesus means what he says when he says stuff like, this is my body, and so I've found that in my experience that to be the case as well, is like, I have these this particular worldview that informs everything that I think and do. Yeah.
I think that's what conversion does. You
Yeah.
know, when you go through conversion as you did, there's this settling effect that happens. Like, there's this initial zeal and excitement and passion that draws you in and wants to change the world, but then there's this realization that you're not God, you're not the Savior, and you are exhausted trying to be that so thoroughly that you're like, I just want to be happy.
Yeah.
And I'm happy now. I know my faith, and I don't have to try to feel like I am missing something anymore. You're home.
Absolutely.
So here's something that I've wondered, and maybe you can help shed light on this a little bit, Aaron. So it seems like so many people, and particularly men, when they have a conversion to the faith, have this like internet rad trad phase. I was one of them too, so
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I know
point you
exactly
out.
where you were.
I still kind of consider myself part of that camp. I'm just not on Twitter.
Okay.
It's funny.
But why is that? And particularly like the sedevacantists thing. I mean, I know you said you were never really tempted in that direction, but many people are.
They are.
I mean, I remember even like a point in my early conversion where I wasn't like there, but I was definitely tempted to it. And so like, why do you think that is?
I think there's kind of a couple different layers, at least that come to the top of my head. The first is that we're all desperate for tradition. I mean, I saw in even just my 6 months at Sojourn, within the Protestant perspective on Christianity, a lot of them are going back to the original, Protestant fathers, so to speak, and they aren't just. Everything is up for grabs in our modern world. Everything is completely just whatever you want it to be, including things that we never thought we'd ever have to discuss, like man or female, and so I just think that there's a foundation there that people are grasping for, and so I don't think that's wrong. I feel like a lot of what I just said could be pitched from an opponent as like almost Freudian. I mean, not, or just like they could psychologize it and be like, yeah, see, it's not actually reasonable. It's just like because we live in a messy world, they just want tradition for that reason. It's like, or that's exactly why tradition's a good thing. So there's that. But then I think also, like, the more specific issue of, say, sedevacantism, I think like when you get into this mode that Catholics of all shades can be a little guilty of, that like because Vatican I happened, and now we have the Pope who can tell us what the truth is no matter what all the time, and that happens at the same time in history in which we have like burgeoning mass media, that we don't need. Yes, like, sure, we as Catholics believe that the unanimous opinion of the Church Fathers is the faith, but also, why don't we just shortcut it to, Pope, tell me what's the faith? And so then once we get enough, a century deep of the Pope saying this is the faith, and then another Pope saying this is the faith, and there's seemingly some amount of contradiction, or at least some desperate need for intense nuance, then people are like, whoa, this doesn't seem true. And so then they want to keep the Catholicism, which is beautiful, but then they want to they say, okay, it is 100% contradictory, and whatever the Pope says is always 100% true, no matter what, in all contexts, all the time. So therefore, because these two things seemingly contradict, sedevacantism. And I think it's like this logic tunnel that gets stuck in, rather than realizing when they were defining papal infallibility, they
weren't talking about every single thing he says are right.
Exactly.
Right. And if you go that route, then you almost unintentionally are looking at the Pope as the savior.
Yeah. I mean,
no different than people who vote for the president, right? They want this person to solve their problems, and when they're failing them, oh, well, you're not the person I thought you were. I mean, we can literally idolize the papacy.
I agree. Yeah,
That's a problem.
Yeah, there's that. There's also this. I found it a little ironic. I think if you look at speaking of the presuppositions and the kind of baseline understanding of the world, when you look at the sedevacantist mentality, it's really just Protestant, like at its core, because it doesn't. I would argue it doesn't actually value authentic tradition in the way that the church understands tradition, but really more like the trappings of tradition, which is an entirely different thing. And so, and when we see, and I want to affirm this to a certain degree, a limited degree, because the trappings of tradition really aren't there anymore. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's, that when I say the trappings of tradition, I mean, the
smells, the bells,
and bells,
right,
all
of
those things.
Are obvious. You can't just walk into any Catholic church and see all of those things.
Mm-hmm. And so, what was I saying? I was going somewhere.
Well, here, let me rescue you for a second.
Please do.
So I want to push back a tiny bit.
Okay.
I think I agree largely with your point, but I don't feel like it doesn't feel Protestant. What I think it feels like to me is more like a Catholic version of sedevacantism, of orthodoxy, is what I'm going to say. It feels like a Catholic version of orthodoxy, in that like we have the priests, we have the sacraments, we have the liturgy, we have all these things, and the liturgy in particular, and then the like organic tradition over time becomes the sole means of the faith, and it is a massive part of it. It's just not 100% of it, and so that's hard to me. It kind of feels like almost Western orthodoxy.
Well, when I say it seems Protestant to me, is I'm thinking of, properly speaking, Protestantism, like if you look at if you look at the original kind of Protestants, you have Luther and Calvin and all of them, and they were basically saying, oh, the church has gone away from the authentic Christian tradition, and they've tacked on all of these traditions that are fake, and so what we need to do is we need to go back to what the original Christians really believed, which then what they decided was actually not what the original Christians actually believed.
Right.
But that was their line of argumentation, and I see a very similar line of argumentation with the sedevacantist, which is really the same thing. We've the church has gotten away from the authentic tradition, and so we need to go back to the golden age of yesteryear and restore it, and in so doing we end up breaking away from the church.
I mean, can you argue that was the Great Schism well before Protestantism? I mean, we're talking about 1054 as well.
Yeah, I mean, well, and see, I don't want to pretend to be an expert in this area at all, because I know very little, but my understanding from a very distant layman's perspective is that largely the Great Schism seems to have been a matter of semantics, that a lot of the misunderstandings are more properly speaking misunderstandings. At least that's how I understand it. I could be very wrong, but I don't know if you
I think you have a misunderstanding of the misunderstanding. Sorry.
I think there's
what?
I understand what you're saying. There's like I think it's one of those things where it just depends on the party at play. Like there were people who genuinely disagree that some of these councils. You could talk about the same thing with the Coptic Orthodox and such. Like there's people who genuinely had opposing theological views, and then there's people who felt like there was a reconciliation available, but the language barriers there. The same words or eerily similar words meant just dramatically different things to different people in different contexts, and so and then it leads to this whole
thing.
So I have a question for you then, in that case, because my head can start spinning, which I think a lot of people can, when you start getting into these types of conversations about factions and schisms and Protestant things. and disagreements within even the church of people who are living under the papal authority, there is some level of like, who cares? Can we just love each other?
Right, and so I think that this whole
stop
spiral,
talking about this stuff. Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so then that kind of gets back to, I feel like, what I meant about, at least in part, and what I meant about, like, then there just comes a point where I was like, you know what? No, like, these things are interesting and they're worthy of discussion, and the people who are scandalized deserve to be heard, and you know, help them see the faith and the church for exactly what it is. But with all that said, like, for a guy who's an accountant and has 3 kids and a wife, it's like, I'm just not going to spend all my time worrying about this.
Right. And so that goes to this question, like, how do we build authentic Catholic community in the midst of such seemingly liturgical divorce, chaos, confusion, and disillusionment, I think, both within traditional Catholics as well as contemporary Catholics who may never have been exposed to the Latin Mass or the traditional things that happened and were in place before Vatican II.
Yeah.
How do we bridge that gap and give people a sense of belonging?
Yes. So first and foremost, unless people want to have good conversations, just don't try and constantly beat people over the head. So that's always a good one.
True.
Like, make your camp appealing, and let them come to you in some sense. The Christians of the Roman Empire weren't running around and wagging their fingers at the pagans. They largely just wanted to be able to convert and be Christian and worship the one true God. And then they were so inspiring to so many pagans, whether it was their martyrdom or just the morals of the Christian faith that then,
Yeah, their joy.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Just as you described it, drew you in. I want
Yeah,
that.
it did. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. That's beautiful.
And and just people find so many reasons to they find so many hills to die on. And I think it just goes back to the whole presupposition thing. It's like, and I don't need to, like, yeah, I will die on a hill for the Catholic faith, but I don't have to win like every disagreement. And so I have, all kinds of like traditionalist opinions about, like, I want to see the old rubrics not be the extraordinary form anymore, but the ordinary form. I want it to be like the common way in celebrating the Latin Rite liturgy again. But I don't, even if I was a widow tomorrow and became Pope Alexander like the 7th, because I'm pretty sure Alexander the 6th was a widow.
Oh, okay. Very good.
I could be getting that wrong, but I wouldn't. It wouldn't be my, like, I wouldn't pull like a Traditionis Custodes, but against the Novus Ordo. Like, I wouldn't be wanting to tell all the boomers that you either learn to love the Latin Mass tomorrow, or we're just gonna have to persecute you. That would be a horrible.
Persecute or excommunicate.
That would be a horrible way to go about
It's
it.
great, right? No, exactly. And so that's where it gets into that heart of, okay, people go to the church for community. They go to church for worship. People have all kinds of different reasons for coming. Obviously, we want to guide them into the heart of Christ and authentic worship, authentic encounter, all of that. But some of that encounter takes place within community events that aren't strictly liturgical in any way, right? So, like, how do we navigate that world when you could technically get community at a community center run by the government? Right, and do those very same things.
Yeah. I think there are two things that I wish I could see more of in lay Catholics. One, on the more purely spiritual side, is I think more of us need to be tertiaries. More of us need to be third orders in different religious communities, because that was frequently how the church supported the idea of the universal call to holiness prior to that being sort of the popular phrase, is that you wanted lay people to be aiming for a rule of life that was proven to help create sanctity and give them something to aim for without it being under the pain of sin and without just saying, you need to be holy. Go figure out what that means. And then
There was structure.
Yeah, there was structure. And that kind of also feeds into a certain amount of community. It's like if you're meeting once a month with people that share a charism with you, that's going to naturally lead to communal opportunities beyond just the meeting every month. On top of that, I just think that people point out in Western history and countries and culture that we used to have all these organic layers of social organizations, whether not just the church and the state, but clubs and all types of just communities that played all kinds of different roles in serving the public. And we've lost that, and we've become more and more atomized. And so I just think that lay Catholics need to be going out of their way to become more interdependent on each other. We need to be working with each other, like professionally, more often. We need to be trying to, we need to stop having a bias and a preference for the outgroup. We obviously love all people, and we love the people on the margins, but we need to redevelop a genuine interest and preference for the in-group. We need to help fellow Catholics. And that, if fellow Catholics are helping each other thrive,
It will naturally reach those.
it will reach other people.
Right, and it's not a trickle-down effect where it's like, yeah, we'll eventually get to the marginalized. It's more like, if you don't inspire those that are intentionally searching, who are present already, who are open and longing for real community, real encounter, real worship, then those people will drift away and become marginalized as well.
Yeah.
Right? But if you do inspire them, then those very people will then also have the energy to serve and look at more creative ways to reach those people who are most in need.
If you aren't taking care of your own family, how can you take care of people outside your family? And so if you're not taking care of the community that you are supposed to actually be a part of, then how can you start taking care of people further out than that? It's like, we're supposed to, there's layers to this, and we have a responsibility to take care of the people that are closest to us first and foremost. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, and that ties into the whole subsidiarity, thing. Part of that Catholic worldview. And then there's also, I appreciate what you said there about a rule of life for lay people. Mm-hmm. I don't even know if most lay people, if you say the phrase rule of life, if they really know what that means.
Yeah, that's very true.
But I go back in my mind to, Saint Teresa's definition of holiness as simply being what you're supposed to be, being what God wants you to be, mm-hmm. and what God made you to be, who God made you to be. And, when we're just sort of drifting around aimlessly, we don't have that rule of life. We're ultimately just sort of gonna we'll
aim for certain bare minimums.
We'll aim for the bare minimum.
They create a higher bare minimum, and while simultaneously aim.
Can you describe the rule of life?
So
in a nutshell?
I am part of the Marian Friars Minor Third Order. The Marian Friars Minor are a traditional reform of Franciscans that are currently based out of North Carolina, and they're the founder is Friar Anthony. He's awesome. I think some of their stuff gets posted on Census Fidelium. And so our rule of life requests that we attempt to pray the little office of the Blessed Virgin Mary every day, that we abstain from meat 4 days a week.
Whoa, that's intense, man.
And this one's a little bit more intense. It's not than maybe it's traditional reform, right?
Sure.
But it obviously, like, just simply abstaining from meat 4 days a week doesn't magically make one holy. You know,
Right.
It's all these things.
It's
that
the
just,
intentions.
Yeah. And there's all kinds of things like we, for the group I'm in, we try to not dress down as much. So they request that we avoid shorts and t-shirts as men, and that we wear collared button-down shirts more often than not, that we don't use a smartphone, because that in particular, Friar Anthony feels very strongly about. Because not only is it a near occasion for basically everyone in our country at this point, because of statistics about all demographics watching things that are sinful against the 6th and 9th commandment, but it's also a near occasion in other sins, because people are constantly ragging each other online and this and that and and we use it for untold hours upon hours and days worth of sloth, that it's just such a ubiquitous sign to our culture that you're part of the culture. And so to have, like, if you, and there are smartphone alternatives out there that look like smartphones.
All right, pull it out.
He even encourages us to have the light phone in particular, not to say that you couldn't get something else, but that he likes that it looks different.
I also love that it's broken and cracked.
Yeah, mine's
it's awesome.
I've beat the snot out of
It's
this
okay.
thing.
It's okay.
But it looks different. Like, I do get people all the time, they're like, wait, that's your, like, I put up to make a call, and they're like, whoa, that's your phone.
So what's the difference between a light phone and a smartphone?
So this thing is a new, not smartphone. It is designed to be useful, and it is not designed to addict you. And to just have you sitting on the internet for infinite amounts of time. It has text and calls. I can use it as a hotspot, which is very useful because I'm running around town for work and I just need to hop on my laptop. It does have an MP3 player, and even has, I think the closest thing to an infinite feed on the internet it has is it does have some type of podcast app. But yeah, I mean, it has a GPS that's okay. If you're really lost, it's kind of helpful.
Email capability?
If someone sends you media, you get like a little Microsoft Word clip art icon indicating that someone tried to send you media, but it forwards to your email.
Huh.
Which I actually think is really good for kids, because it's like, if somebody sent your kid something inappropriate, you're going to know.
Yes, that's good. That's good. These are this reminds me of something I saw on one of Matt Fradd's episodes. He interviewed the
Wise phone guy.
The wise phone guy, right. So there's a lot of alternatives out there that I think could be very helpful. Another aspect in helping people build community.
Absolutely.
Right?
That's really good. I think more people should consider doing things like that.
Yeah.
I've, much to my chagrin, not yet found a way to detach from mine, although I've gotten about as close as I think one can, because I'm a type 1 diabetic, and my reader is on my phone, and I have it goes off if I go low or high, and like it's so like if I'm in the middle of the night, it wakes me up.
And that's legitimate, but
I hate it. I hate because it feels like a really lame excuse. And I got
a strong excuse, because I feel mean, because I was prepared for my secular argument. My secular argument to anyone who brings that, even if whether they're impressed or disgusted by my phone, my go-to argument is Peter Thiel, or Thiel, however you pronounce the guy's name, who's a Silicon Valley billionaire. Mm-hmm. He doesn't use a smartphone. If he doesn't need a smartphone, then I can promise you, like, you can get away with it.
And I've basically, as close as I can, have bricked my own phone. Like, I don't have any internet on there. I don't have email. I don't have YouTube. Like, my wife and I just ordered a home phone so that when so that when I'm not at work,
Back to the 90s
I can keep
we go.
I can stick my phone in a drawer and then only let it need it to do the constant monitoring of my blood sugar at night. So trying to do those things to get around it, but it is so hard.
Mm-hmm.
Your point about the light phone is not a sponsor of Spirit Spire, by the way.
Very true.
But your point about the light phone not being designed to addict you is worth mentioning or honing in on, because the smartphone is literally designed with that in mind, the colors and the light and the
psychology of how all the apps are designed. I mean, the entire industry of fake video games have been created both around the gambling addictions and around just people. They've learned that we get these dopamine effects from seeing the notification and seeing the little badge number next to the app corner, and we want to see it and we want to know. And it's
So what do you mean by fake video game? What is that?
I just mean Farmville type stuff, or
Farmville, Minecraft, things like that.
I don't want to be mean to
Hey,
Minecraft.
don't knock Minecraft.
I don't know enough about
Shoot!
I'm not
I
a
just
zoomer.
I just canceled myself, everyone.
Minecraft, but
I cannot believe you would do
it's
that.
virtual Legos. Plus maybe RuneScape mixed together. I don't know.
This will not be a
Forgive me,
clip,
Zoomers.
so I don't get lasered in on it.
I can't believe you even put those in the same.
I'm so sorry.
category.
I used
Like,
to play
what is wrong
Bejeweled
with you?
Blitz on.
That's what I'm talking about.
Facebook.
That's a waste of time.
Yeah, it was the worst.
And
I hated
God
it.
forbid somebody would spend money on it.
Oh gosh, I know people who did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's.
I mean, there's a whole. This rolled over to the real video game industry, on consoles, where the big corporate video game producers who aren't really in it because they like video games. They're just there to literally try and make money off the industry. They on all these shooters and such. They just started designing these items that you could get basically through lottery. And you can either play the game an insane amount of time to try and randomly get certain completely virtual perks that you want, or you could pay for some of it, or sometimes it was even pay to get better odds. Not even just I want that cool Spider-Man outfit.
A lottery.
Did you have skins and stuff?
Yeah, but that's I wish it was
So
just
I'll
that
pay
for it.
$10 for a chance to win a skin
Yeah,
on a video game
there you go.
of a character that doesn't exist
Yes.
with friends I've never met. Good. That's
Good.
it. That's great.
Yes.
That's good community, right? No. This is the opposite of what we're talking about, right? But yeah, there will be, I think, Catholics called one day, if not already happening, into the virtual world to rescue and evangelize people and pull them out of that world.
They'll
right?
probably be working in cooperation with New Polity over in Steubenville.
Right. There you go. There you go.
They talk about how they have all this online presence, and they're yes, we have a podcast and we're doing the whole internet thing, but we want you to go back out to the real world.
Right, we're doing this for you to stop doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. And honestly, I would say that's my entire attitude toward media now. I had a moment in my life back in 2018 where I said, no more Facebook. Just went away. The account still exists, but I literally have not logged into it.
Yeah.
And I don't watch movies and TV shows by myself. I don't have a relationship with fictional characters on a screen. It's a different thing when you're reading a book, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very different thing. But even that can become addictive to the point of negligence, just like anything in life, right? So
If
it's
you're just
really
reading
about
a bunch of pulp fiction,
right.
It's nothing more than the consumerist version of books.
Exactly. So how do you integrate these goods, including the use of technology in responsible ways, to actually build Catholic community in ways that actually uplifts the human person and creates a conduit of encounter with Christ? That's a challenge.
Yeah.
It's a big challenge.
And we can bring in Family Renewal Project on this.
Hey, that's a good call.
I
FRP.
I don't attend almost any of these events, but that's partly because I was going to some of the Catholic Couples Network stuff for a little bit when that some years ago.
Well, you're also the guy kind of responsible for helping getting us all paid, right?
Yeah, I helped process payroll.
Our bookkeeper, thank you very much for all of that work. Truly.
But they do the men's groups and the women's groups and all kinds of things, and I do think that when I say I want like Catholics becoming more interdependent on each other, like I don't want, like on one hand, I think it would be really cool if within a tiny subsection of this we started like a Catholic business owner or even someone with a sales kind of job, maybe they sell insurance, like some type of networking lunch group for Catholics in Louisville.
Is this your nonprofit idea?
No, not
yet. Oh, okay, not yet.
No. But I think that would be cool. But even that, I think, is like, that's very money oriented. I get that as Christians, like that's probably not the first thing we should think of. But pre-political stuff, like literally just the men's group, like the men just getting together, like that just creates opportunity for people to get to know each other. And know that when something's wrong in their life and they need help in some way, that hopefully they've built up relationships with these people that they can come to them for help. Or like, hey, I am a small business owner, so I think about the business side of it a little bit more. But it's like, I need to hire someone. Are there young Catholic men who are an accountant? And I want to help support them so they can have a thriving family and they don't feel economically pressured to avoid a conception for an extra year or 3 years or whatever. Those types of things lead to a healthier Catholic community.
Mm-hmm. So. Mm-hmm. And that's an important thing to learn, because we have to basically rebuild the infrastructure of the church in some ways in the light of the technological and sexual and other revolutions of sorts. Mm-hmm. And those are part of it, just basic community needs.
Yes.
Gathering, talking, meeting.
Mm-hmm.
There's the question of the infrastructure is one thing. Of course, that's the means. But I liked, Aaron, the word you said, whatever that was, a few minutes ago, that we need to, the word was interdependence. Mm-hmm. that needs to be restored among Catholics. And so, what do you mean? I think I know what you mean by that, but maybe the audience doesn't. What exactly do you mean by interdependence, and what would that look like? An authentic Catholic interdependence in a community type setting? Yeah.
So the easiest way for me to describe it, I think does a little bit of injustice to the larger concept, because it's going to involve dollars and cents. And so, like, the Mormons, like a bunch of their young men go to BYU because they develop enough of a Mormon and professional network while they're there that they can conceivably get good jobs as they're growing up and starting families, that they can comfortably enter the family life and marriage life without stressing too much about the economic factors. And many of the women go to BYU not for what I just described, but in fact to find a high quality husband. And so I think it would be amazing if people were saying, it's amazing that we have a list of Catholic schools in which we say we should send our kids to these high quality, truly Catholic universities so that they aren't brainwashed and still get a good education. But what if they also if they weren't going on to the religious life, what if they could also go to those schools because they felt extra confident that they would have a professional and Catholic network that they could plug into and continue on with their
right. It's not
life.
Just about escaping from the world. It's actually about building a solid Catholic community.
Like the guilds in the Middle Ages were very much interested in the financial welfare of their members, and so they made sure that the members were capable of providing for themselves. But there's also guilds from the Middle Ages had all kinds of awesome things. If guild members were sick, they would have a guild member going to their house to help take care of them and sit by their bedside. So the other side of it is that we want people, within the interdependence, we want to our fellow Catholics to know that if things are bad, that there are lenders of last resort within their community. If you bought an old farmhouse because you loved the idea of going back to the land, and you ended up with a house that was completely covered in mold because it made it past the inspection, instead of just being having to file bankruptcy because now your house value is upside down, you can't just sell it or something, or you need the money to go to do all the mold remediation and this and that. Like, I wish Catholics with our community knew that there was someone who could help them navigate that. And I bet, a lot of this stuff is individualized. I mean, you're not going to be able to just export this to an institution without relationship, right?
Well, and that's the temptation, because I have people in my life in this Catholic community locally that I know that if I had that kind of issue, or if whatever thing happens, I can call somebody up and they'd be at my house.
Absolutely.
And I'm very confident of that, and I'm very blessed. But you're right. I mean, I wish that was something that more Catholics in particular had access to. And I wonder if it doesn't, part of it anyways, doesn't come down to our, what's the word I'm looking for? Degradation, perhaps, of the word community that we have all been guilty of by our, how it's used online, and community no longer means community. It means some sort of nebulous thing, and I think has ultimately kind of lost all meaning.
Yeah. Yeah, community, I feel like, has largely just been what was previously maybe an online network is now a community. It's like, right, is that?
That's not right.
Or even it's just if you have a couple guys who like Minecraft, it's like the Minecraft community and stuff. You know what I mean? It's not community. That's not what that means.
Well, then there's the other extreme. In the church, we had the continued secularization of our community events, right? Parish picnics and fish fries and fall festivals becoming more and more just like any other city festival or picnic, and it becomes completely devoid of prayer or a spiritual focus or a family environment where you're inviting things that are going to make a quick buck instead of things that are actually going to build friendships and not just bring money. Right? When it became more about the money, you basically did anything that could boost your money, even if it was not very safe or friendly or appropriate.
Yeah.
The tough thing, though, and this is what I really want to get to, because this is not something I've really actually worked out in my head, but it's like, I don't want a bunch of events. Like, even if you made, say, the parish picnic not just some like the county fair and with a bunch of drunk adults wandering around and stuff. Like, even if we didn't have that situation and it was, everybody, whatever, did Vespers or something, it's still that I still don't think that's it, because you're still looking at just an event, whereas actual community is something entirely organic. It's not an event or a thing that you get people to go to. And so that's something that I've not worked out, is like, well, then what is it? I know what it's not, but what is it? And I guess I could say, well, I know it when I see it, but how do I create that? How do I, you know what I mean? And intentionally create something that happens organically.
Yeah. Well, I think people just have to be really purposeful about actually just getting together, being in the same room with people, talking to each other. Because, I see in my own family, and not everyone in my family still practices the faith, but my older sister moved out to Seattle for 5 years, and our relationship suffered for it. And when she moves back for 2 years, our immediate family felt more like a family than ever before. Like, we were getting together more often. We all spoke to each other more often. And I don't know. I mean, maybe that didn't necessarily yet translate to anything beyond just seeing each other and talking to each other. But I didn't feel like I had a modern sort of disparate family. I felt like I was like, wow, even though we're not all on the same page with the faith, we knew we could depend on each other. And that regardless of difference of opinions or how much time passes, like, I've seen now in my life that blood is thicker than water. Like, enough time has passed in my life that even though I still love, like, my best friends from high school, and I love many of the men that are godfathers to my children, that there's still something about the family that God gave me that I know I can depend on very intimately for. And so I think if we all just need to be going out of our way to see each other more often. I mean, like, even just the practice of, and this isn't a Catholic thing, but like just the practice of Sunday visits to people. How often do people do that anymore? You know, it's like I go to see my extended family every one Sunday a month. But, like, I don't necessarily purposefully get together with some of my closer Catholic peers every single month, you know? It's just like, well, we got busy. Maybe we'll have someone over for dinner eventually.
I think part of it is it's meant to be a family day. So if you have family in town, you're more likely going to spend that time with family, even extended family. If you don't have family in town, then you would, if you're intentional, would and should seek out other Catholics who are in that same world where you can spend time together. Like a friend of mine, Brian Kane, who helped get this started, he created a Telegram group called Impromptu Park Visits recently in the last week or so, and I just added whatever families would be interested in bringing their kids to the park with their spouse on a random moment's notice, and I love the impromptu experience, right? So Brian's, like, to me, one of those expert community builders. He's very good at bringing people together in that way, and there are more people like that in the Archdiocese, and that's one way it's organic, right?
Yes.
Just being intentional about gathering together. For me, I wasn't the YouTube guy who was converted through that. I read some books when I was young, but I literally grew up in the church, absorbed it my whole life because my grandma was director of religious ed, and my mom and dad were very involved. And so that just brought me in that sense. So my sense of community was more not based on the events, but more based on the fact that at these events and things, it was just a lifestyle of people who lived near each other, knew each other, trusted each other, and loved each other. They wanted to be together and enjoyed but with so many of the wounds that came in the family and within the church and the scandals, as well as the disillusionment and isolation that came from social media, those families have all moved away, drifted away, or left the faith completely. And it's been painful to watch that. We've all experienced it. Man, it's a challenge. So
everything you just said reminded me within this whole topic, like a sort of one sentence phrase, a way of thinking about the community thing, and like even tying it into our children, is what is the adult culture that I'm raising my children into? Because I think sometimes, and this is going to be from a more lay perspective, sometimes I think it can be easy in the midst of such a broken world to think, well, if I just, and I'm homeschooling my kids, okay? Like, everything I'm about to say is like half accusing myself.
It's all good.
Like, if I just homeschool my kids and we go to, let's just move out to the country, and let's go to, maybe we'll even go to like a monastery for church every Sunday, and then my kids will be like successfully kept away from all the evil things, because there are a lot of evil things out there, and then they'll just go to heaven. And it's like, wait a second, what about their entire adult life?
Right.
Like, they're gonna grow. They might not even, like, hypothetically, these kids might not rebel. They might really be genuinely good people as they grow up. But also, like, what then? Like, who are they going to marry? What are they gonna do to take care of themselves if they're not going to go become a religious? Like that whole part of it just gets forgotten, I feel like. And then, of course, the other extreme that maybe secular people are more guilty of, but many of us, maybe worldly Catholics, are guilty of it too, is just, rather than what adult culture am I bringing my children into, it's just like, I want my child to have the best possible childhood ever, and I want them to constantly experience delight over everything, and I never want to upset them.
Yeah. I know somebody who says, I only have friends, and he's a dad. He says, I only have friends that I would be okay if my kids grew up to be just like them.
There you go.
That's good.
And that's pretty much the rule that I have.
Yeah.
Like, I'm only friends with people that I would be okay, or even very happy if my kids grew up to be just like them. And it's like, why? Well, because my kids will likely grow up to be just like the people that I surround myself with, especially if I take the whole community thing seriously. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, I'm actually, I'm not going to give my kid a smartphone. And like, I'm going to, have my kids spend time with my friends' kids and, all of those things. Like, that's just super critical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's like the old adage, you become like the 5 people you spend the most time with, right?
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
And yet people can use that and be unintentional about that, and then they become degenerates, right? People that aren't. And even within the church that can happen, where we got to a point where it was more focused on unity in the community and not unity in the Eucharist, which gives birth to community, bears fruit in community, a communal sense of belonging, people in communion with one another and not just in close proximity to each other who attend the same events and have the same kind of fun and enjoy the same kind of entertainment.
Absolutely.
That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people who are like-minded, who are longing for the same goals, they have the same kind of worldview and values, so that their children are handed on a faith. A legacy is given to their children to then continue that into the future. If you're not doing that, what are you doing?
And I think that's why third orders are important.
And that's a wrap. No, that was a good way to tie that into a nice bow. It's true.
So you brought up, I forgot I even referenced this to you. So my nonprofit idea.
Yeah, exactly. I wanted to get to that before we ended the show today.
Was that, so I want to start a nonprofit called, the name doesn't matter, but I would name it, maybe the Society of St. Boniface and Francis Xavier. 1, because it's incredibly wordy, and 2, because both of them are infamous and famous for knocking over and destroying pagan idols.
Dude, that's so based right there.
And the point of it, though, would actually be it would not be necessarily directed at pagans per se. It would also be directed at various denominations of Christianity and even modern architecture within Catholic churches, because it would be geared towards buying up churches or non-Christian places of worship that have been lost because they don't have attendees anymore, and then renovating them with traditional Catholic aesthetics in mind. So I think it would be fun to take a round Novus Ordo church and put a high altar in the middle of it with I forget. I don't even know what the structure is called. When you
Baldacchino.
Sorry.
In St. Louis version. Okay, so a baldacchino.
Yeah. A nave. Yes.
Yeah, and then knock even just even leave maybe the nature of how it was shaped there. Don't even change the window shapes. Just knock out whatever ugly stained glass or lack of stained glass they put in, and use that shape to put in beautiful traditional stained glass and cover it with icons. It doesn't have to be. The walls need to be covered with icons. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the exact style of like Russian and Greek Orthodox icons. There's a whole world of Christian artwork that existed prior to the Renaissance in the West. There were Carolingian styles and Gothic styles and such. You should look up Hillary White if you're interested in that topic. She has an amazing Substack going into Western and Eastern iconographic styles. But yeah, I think our walls should be covered in that stuff. And I think it would be fun to basically have an entire nonprofit dedicated to buying up these buildings. Both, I just focused on like maybe ugly modern Christian architecture, but even just like taking an abandoned pagan place of worship and saying, it's ours now. Sorry, guys. The true God's being worshipped here now.
Yes, dude, I absolutely love this idea. I think it's right in line with the desire of our hearts as Catholics today that have watched the church seemingly burn down in front of us spiritually. How do we rebuild a new, vibrant Catholic culture? And oftentimes the thought is, well, we just need to build a new church or a new cathedral. But sometimes it's not that. It's taking what we have been given by God, even if at this moment it doesn't seem to be very beautiful or isn't used very beautifully. And because of the conversion in our own hearts, the rebuilding of the church within our bodies, which is the ultimate temple, right? That becomes simply the beautiful churches and architectural achievements are simply manifestations of the conversion, the illustration of what God has done within us, but now out here.
Yes.
That's magnificent. Write that down.
And
you
then
know, you should
also,
put
like,
it
to get it started before some billionaire gives us enough money to go buy a whole church building, is that I actually might do this sooner rather than later, is the first steps would probably just go to any priest who wants nicer, more beautiful and traditional vestments, and have a little fund that like you can do that for. So instead of somebody, so you could, because that sounds really easy to go to like a bunch of people at your church and your diocese and say, don't you wish they had more beautiful vestments? We all love when they have more beautiful vestments. Well, instead of you thinking you need to go drop $10,000 and therefore you're not going to do it because you don't have $10,000, what if a bunch of us just put in $10 a month into a nonprofit? And those of you who do get to itemize your taxes, hey, you even get to write this off on your taxes because it's a 501c3, and we'll get more beautiful vestments for more of the priests in the diocese. And then eventually we'll buy buildings.
Well, right. Start small, build yourself toward that. That's a good thing.
Don't know what the middle ground is between investments and buildings.
This all present.
So what do you say to? Because I can imagine some people are gonna. That would ruffle some feathers. So what do you say to someone then who is like, why do you care so much about this? It's really not a big deal. It's, mass is mass is mass. What's the big deal? Why are you making such a big stink?
Well, my kid is my kid, and I love my kid no matter what, right? But I want my kid to behave properly. So I want a mass that is more fitting for an infinitely good God, and God is true, good, and beautiful, right? Is he beautiful? Is that
Yes, he is.
Okay, so,
it is a transcendental.
So I mean, why shouldn't the churches reflect that?
Yeah.
And why shouldn't the liturgy reflect that?
There's order in the midst of chaos. That's the point. How do we bring that back?
Well, and I think that's it. Is like beauty is not like random or just sort of there for its own sake. I mean, things can just simply be beautiful in themselves, but the fact that they are beautiful always lifts our soul to God. And so, like, why should our liturgy not lift our soul to God in every little detail of it, and that's I think where part of what I was getting at earlier when I said, tradition like actual tradition versus the trappings. Like it's not just having a beautiful statue or a beautiful stained glass window or
a beautiful liturgy,
beautiful high altar, or even a beautiful liturgy. It's like what is the spiritual significance of this thing? Like, is this truly lifting my soul to God? And I definitely don't, I do think we as Catholics need to get away from the at least practical belief that we seem to have, that we've bought into this secular idea that beauty is subjective, or
beauty is not in the eye of the beholder. Beauty is in the responsibility of the beholder, and in the essence of the divine creator, and in the thing itself and its capacity to point us to the divine creator. If beauty is not pointing us to divine realities, it is not beautiful.
There you go. That has been rehearsed, but it is accurate.
Yes, I've said that many times. But I know it so deeply because I always was like, okay, I want beauty. I want the liturgy to be beautiful. I want the church to be beautiful again. But everybody thinks beauty's just subjective, like personal opinion, like whatever you want it to be. Beauty's in the eye of the beholder. And I couldn't get past that because I always assumed that was true because everyone said it.
Everyone says that.
Do you see? You tell a lie long enough, everybody starts to believe it and take it for granted. But I didn't want to just take it for granted. So, like, learning that was one of the most powerful things in my life. Like, that, I think, is a way to restore the church, truly.
And our local ordinariate priest in Louisville, Father Erdman, he has said something along the lines, I've heard him say it a few times in the confessional, about like whether it's prayer or penance, or in some ways like doing a good thing even when you're imperfect, or like, if you're so busy, yada yada yada, maybe you should be better about making time for prayer. But like if you're trying to say your rosary lying down in bed and you fall asleep praying the rosary, that doesn't neglect, like, that might, maybe, like, from the outsider, they might say, like, see, you're a hypocrite, you don't make actual proper time for these things, or you don't give it enough, don't take it seriously enough. But he's like, but the good action is, like, it's not actually hypocritical. Like, you're still trying to do the good thing. So, likewise, when people are like, well, who cares if the Mass is this or that? It's still the Mass. It's like, really, we just need to be holy, and we need to be there for the Mass. It's like, well, I can try to be holy and want the Mass to be beautiful. Like, these aren't...
They're not mutually exclusive.
They're not mutually exclusive things.
Exactly.
None of it's hypocritical. It's like we just want the good thing across the board.
That's a hard path to tread because there are so many wounds and distrust in the church because of scandal and whatnot, but there is a path forward. I have a couple final thoughts that I wanted to throw out, but before that, I didn't know if Vincent, you had any final thoughts, or and then of course before we get to after we share what we have, like give you a chance for final thoughts as well, of course, because this is about you, Aaron, and your faith journey. So, Vincent, any thoughts?
No, I don't think I do. But it's been good. So thanks for coming on.
It really has. It's
Thank
been
you.
a true gift. I think a couple things that stirred on my heart as you spoke, Aaron, about building Catholic community and rejuvenating the church and the liturgy and all of what we long to pass on to our own children is being intentional about gathering together. Right, and doing so in whatever capacity you have to, within your family, within your friends. And I think of that, the power of small groups, right? Just the intentionality, and how do you actually inspire other adults to mentor young people, or other adults, how do you inspire young adults to mentor even younger high schoolers or middle schoolers? That to me is like an age-old question in the church. Like, it's always through that inspires an organic process. First, obviously, gathering people in a wide swath of just men or women or couples or teens. But there's also the intentionality of within the larger community, smaller groups need to form.
Yes.
Of people who are like-minded, so that you could have people who would be interested in third orders, depending on which religious order they're connecting to, or which charism they're most excited about. That's a big thing, but that's related to the interdependence. Like, how do we get people to rely on each other. We grew up in America, and there's this independence mentality to the point where we're always revolting against another tyrant, right? And now the tyrant is our own body. The tyrant is God himself, right? And that's a tragedy. But independence should lead us to interdependence, so that from interdependence we can find communion again in the church, so that we could one day inspire solidarity in the world. That's kind of the trajectory from John Paul II's Novo Millennio Inuente. He actually breaks those down in that exact order, which is very powerful that you mentioned that, because that's what Brian Kane and I are working on with the Great Novena.
Absolutely.
Right? For the 2000th anniversary of the church, like, imagine if we had, 10, 20, 40, 100 different small groups that have cropped up throughout the Archdiocese of people who actually love each other, want to spend time together, and build intentional communities, so that nonprofits like yours could gain some traction, right? And we could build beautiful churches or renovate existing churches again. But starting here. So thank you for coming. It's been a gift. So,
thank you.
Any other thoughts? I know you wanted to plug your business and all the work you do.
That was the inspiration for this.
What?
So I own Bonaventure Bookkeeping. It's an virtual accounting firm. It's 4.5 years old now. We focus on financial statements for businesses, payroll, sales tax. We don't yet do annual tax returns. So I know a lot of people hear accounting and they think tax returns. I'm sorry, I could sit down with you and help you get through Tax Act, but I'm not currently doing tax returns. And I listen to different things about how to get your name out there, especially for virtual accounting firms, and they'd say, like, you should go get on a podcast. And I was like, okay, great. I do really Catholic nonprofit accounting. I could get on. John Soul's part of a Family Renewal Project. I do their accounting. We could talk about that.
Yeah, you're the one who presses the button to make sure I get paid. I should at least thank you enough for bringing me on.
We didn't talk about that stuff because it doesn't really matter as much.
No. The financial stuff is so important, and that people need help financially. Because if you can't take care of the little things, like a friend of mine who wants to get into finances said, every dollar we get is a tool that we can use responsibly.
Absolutely.
And I need that message just as much as the next guy, because if you can't take care of the little things, and the money you get are little things, how are you going to take care of your family, and how do you expect to do anything in the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And oh boy, so I work with a lot of small businesses that, and like every single time I get a new client, it's funny to see like how they thought that their accounting was totally fine. They just don't want to do it anymore. And it's like, your accounting wasn't fine.
Right.
Accounting is a whole subject with all its own rules. And then on top of that, you get accounting software, and every accounting software has its own wacky menus and works a weird particular way. And I can promise you that if you haven't spent 10 years doing accounting and you're just kind of figuring it out on the weekends, it's probably not that great.
That's true.
But I like to help and teach.
Yeah.
Like, it's fun to work with people who want to talk about their accounting. It's also fun to work with people who don't care, and they're happy to just export it to me, because I have like a small golf course. He doesn't even own the land that his golf course is on. The city of New Albany does. He just has, like, I guess, the right to run a golf course there.
Wow.
And he works with me, and he doesn't look at his financial statements. At the end of the year, I send him his income statement and his balance sheet and some other reports so that he can give it to his tax preparer. And that's all he does with it.
That's pretty cool. So how can people get in touch with you to ask you for your help and services?
Well, our website is www.bonabook.xyz. So that's an abbreviation of Bonaventure Bookkeeping, BONABOOK. And it's .xyz, because that's fun.
That's awesome. And that'll be in the show notes.
Yeah.
Right. So
exactly.
that'd be great. Excellent. Well, thanks again, Aaron, for being on here, and maybe we'll have you again sometime on another fun topic.
We barely even. I felt like there was so much we could talk about. Just if you wanted to do the personal story thing, we skipped my wife's conversion. So.
Oh, right. That's definitely a thing, and it may be, that maybe you bring your wife on one day and you give a personal testimony and get a little bit more in detail, right?
She's gonna hold you to that when she hears that. She went into broadcasting, and she still holds it against me that now she doesn't get to use her broadcasting. So.
Oh gosh, you definitely have to. Absolutely, that's awesome. I went through school for broadcasting too, so it's a gift to be able to use it for this. So,
There you go.
Yeah,
All
awesome.
right.
Well, praise the Lord. All right. Well, everyone, thank you again so much for joining us. Be sure to like and subscribe, and so that we can continue to spread the gospel as far as we can throughout the YouTube world and other podcasting. So continue to pray for us, and we will pray for you, and we'll see you next week on another episode of Spirit and Spire. God bless.
Thank you.